because we're not a known entity. We're not a front of the room consumer brand that everybody would know about. If you went back and asked your IT organisations, they will probably all say yes. You may even use Informatica products. I'm going to start off with a little story, and I'm going to give you the answer at the end. It's going to be a little bit of a teaser. You know, what is the difference between 4 criminals and talent acquisition? Has anybody got any answers? Because I'd love to hear them first up. I had thought of that answer as well, but no, there is a correlation. Anybody? Okay, so keep that thought. At some point in the presentation later on today, it will like, bang, there's the answer. And it will be, wow, I never really considered that. So that's where it is. So, Brad Cook, work with Informatica. Not many people have heard of who Informatica is. We are a company that's been around for a long, long time, but I would say our real grassroots in data and the data space really started in 2003 when Sohail Abbasi took over CEO of the company. From then, we've been on a trajectory of 7+ years of greater than 70% compound growth. We're the only software company in the Valley that's ever done that. We did miss our number Q2 last year, and we got hurt pretty badly, but we're back on target now. We're coming back with the same growth we've been before. So we're not a massive company, but if you go out and look at the IBMs and the Oracles and our big competitors, most of them have our products within their own networks, or they actually OEM our products. That's why most people actually don't hear of who Informatica actually is. So we're about an $800 million company as of last year. We're sitting around 2,850 employees globally. We're in 28 countries. We have customers in about 82 countries, and customers range from across the board, from governments to councils to retailers to you name it. There is somebody in our customer base that's doing something similar to what you're doing today. 28 direct countries, and we're the only company that's actually won a customer loyalty award 7 years in a row, so we're pretty proud of that. So we've been around in this space, in the data space. Our roots started in what they call ETL. Does anyone know what ETL stands for? Extract, transfer, and load. How do I extract data from one system? How do I transfer it to another? And then how do I load it into the new system to be able to transfer data around? That was our roots. And when you think of the topic today of big data, I'm going to debunk a couple of theories of what big data is. I think it's an overused term. Everybody's a big data company. Is anybody in the room a big data company? Who are you from?
White data.
Well, you're a big data. Yes, you are a big data company, and you'll understand why in a second why you are. Anybody else? Okay. Normally, everybody is a big data company in themselves. I'm going to debunk what that is and set some parameters of what that really means, how it really means to me anyway. So we'll cover off through that. Our biggest objective is for customers to get a return on data. At the end of the day, there is masses and masses of information, and that's all it will be, that data, unless it gets turned into something that's useful. So the singular core objective of the company is to get return on investment for our customers through getting the value of the data to them at the lowest possible cost. So it's as simple as that. It's a true ROI model. And that's where we start getting into big data and how big data can actually transform a business by leveraging the data that they have, masses and masses of data, to be able to go and do something with that. So we're really empowering organisations to maximise their return on data, to drive their business imperatives. And there's a really great story. It's a large retailer, you probably, especially the women, you probably bought lots of shoes from this retailer, whereas they've actually leveraged a number of our products. And when you walk into the store, if you have a Twitter account or a Facebook account, it realises that you're in the building because of all the geolocators, and you may be receiving text messages or different things about this special that's on over here, or if you go and invite a friend to come and purchase, we'll give them 20% off, and it's all because of the integration of the data of social media into the handheld phone that you're walking around with today, and actually turning that around to produce revenue on that. So there's a lot of things that can happen when you really start to think about the breadth and the depth that you can take with data. IT is changing, so big data is really changing the way IT is actually working. So primarily we've always had, where is the data? It's been primarily on-premise. IT organisations have been on-premise, big data centres, IBM mainframes, whatever they may be. They were all in a big room with big air conditionings and a raised floor. That was what the IT world was about. You then had the big transactions. So the big Oracles, the SAPs, the PeopleSofts, they were the transactions. We're doing one-to-one type of transactions around the place. And then you had the how. Now, they were all through mainframe terminals, dumb terminals, PCs, whatever that was. It was basically connected back to a data center to do something. And that's the way IT had been run for many, many years. Well, things are changing. From an IT perspective, people are moving their applications, cloud, to the cloud. Salesforce is a perfect example of now a cloud-based application. Workday is a good example of that. Amazon is a good example of that. They're now businesses built on the cloud. So IT is changing. They're moving from on-premise to what we like to think is a hybrid, because I don't think we'll ever get away from having an IT organisation or having some data in the building, but most of them are actually leveraging across the board and moving things to the cloud, because then it gives the opportunity of getting access to that from anywhere. You don't have to be behind the firewall to get access to it. What's changing for us is interactions. And this is probably the biggest area where the volume of data is growing exponentially, and really exponentially. It's scary how fast this is actually growing. So the interactions around social media is really changing from an IT perspective as well. Actually, I'll go back. How many people in this room have a policy around social media that you have to adhere to? Good. Marketing, IT, they drive that because there's a lot of interactions, and no press is bad press, but you don't want to have bad press out there, and that can happen very, very quickly. I mean, things are changing. We're no longer just having it on the desktop. People want to be on the road. You want to be able to access Salesforce. You want to be able to access whatever applications you have on the street when you're out there, not in the office. So that's changing. But data's changing as well. So, as I said, new applications are coming around every day. Salesforce, Oracle's now moving to the cloud platform, NetSuite, SAP, Amazon, all of these things are providing services, so you can now buy software as a service. You don't have to have all the applications. You can buy Google Docs as a perfect example. You have one application, I don't have to have a license on my PC, I can just use it as I need to from the cloud. And to do that, you have to have a lot of data transfer moved between two systems. The interactions, as I said, the volume of interactions, and there's a lot of really, really unique data there. When you start looking at geodata and you start looking at the interactions that go on around social media, Twitter, Facebook, the amount of information they have on all of us that has a Facebook account is scary. What they do with it behind the scenes, we find out when they bring out new products. One of those big social media giants that I just mentioned is actually a customer of ours. You wouldn't know that because it's behind the scenes. It's about how do they manage the data. And I will give you a definition of what big data really is. So you can walk away here armed with, okay, now I understand what big data really is and what it really means. And really moving a lot of that data to a visual application where it can be leveraged on the front end. So the data is changing, not just IT, but how IT has to manage that data through the systems as well. And it's all being driven because of this. The social interactions, and it's not just Twitter and Facebook, it's the LinkedIns, it's the Pinterests, it's a million little startups popping up every single day that has some level of data that's useful to somebody. Uber. Who's heard of Uber? Okay, if you haven't, you should go and load the app because it's awesome. It's a limousine service basically. It's a glorified taxi service, but you go to your phone and you say, I want to get picked up here, plug it in, it knows exactly where you are based on GPS, and it's in the Bay Area now. I think it started in Seattle 6 months ago, but for women, it's fantastic because it's an added level of security because they know exactly where you are at any point in time. So it's actually a really cool service if you want to get picked up, and you can tell exactly where the car is because it's all GPS tracked. Can you imagine how much data comes behind that to know exactly where the car is, so it can tell you exactly where it is? You know where the car's coming, so hang on a minute, there's a car that drove past that I thought was the person picking me up, because it's like a limo service, doesn't have a taxi service on the top. You want to know that the car you're actually getting into is actually the Uber car, and it's all tracked. That's the sort of level of startup that's happening by leveraging data and the power of data to put it into your hands, into the PDA. And that's where a lot of the growth is coming from, is in that social interaction and that interaction from something to you or to us. So big data is all about big transactions, lots and lots of transactions coming from the Oracles, the IBMs, the Sybases, the interactions, the transactions, the interactions from the social side of things, but other things like click streams. RFID tags. Does everybody know what an RFID tag is? Usually, an RFID tag is a little tag that gets stuck into, perfect example is a dog. You stick a tag on the back of a dog and you can scan it and tell who owns the dog. RFID tags are in so many different technologies today, from trucking to, there was a talk years ago about inserting one into the human head to know where everybody was. That day is probably coming in somewhere, but that produces a lot of data. When you combine big transactions and big interactions, you have a big data processing problem. So let me debunk big data. Big data is just this. It's the leverage of data that cannot be used or manipulated using the current tools today. Does everybody know what a relational database is? It's been around for 40 years. A relational database is pretty much a flat file with a couple of links between individual files or individual records to link them together. If you have the masses and masses of social data, that structure becomes way too big. So big data is not about the size. This is one of those things where size really doesn't matter. It's about how you have to process that data, how complex that data is using today's tools. And that's where things like Hadoop and HBase and those sort of things have been developed, because they're different ways of structuring the data, and it's different ways of pulling and manipulating that data out to give it to you in a certain way. And it really started from Google. It started at Google many, many years ago when they said, okay, we want to take all of the data that's available on the net, we want to make it searchable because we want to be able to leverage it and turn it into some revenue. And they went, okay, well, wow, there's a lot of data on the web. How are we going to manage that? And that's when they come up with a problem. It's like, we need to come up with something different, a different way of taking that much information, consolidate it into one place that we can actually start to manipulate with it. So that's what big data is. So everybody's a big data company. Big data is simply the processes of which you have to. Big data is simply how you leverage the data, not using the tools that are available today. So you have to use things differently. And that's how it started. So Hadoop was developed. I'm not sure where the elephant comes from, but Hadoop was developed to actually manage that. And Hadoop is probably one of the fastest growing technologies, fastest growing skill set in the world. Data scientists have to understand this. If there's any one skill set that we are going to be in masses of shortage in the next 5 years, it's data scientists in the data space. They're already starting to control ridiculous salaries, and I don't see them getting any better. So just to show you how complex big data can be, really, and I'll show you in a second how I'll coin the word bucketize, how I bucket big data into 3 different areas. From big data, you'll have people like EMC, HDS talk about big data from a storage perspective or an infrastructure perspective. You'll have the operational side, which is where we sort of sit to glue it all together. You have the infrastructure as a service, the Amazons, the Windows, databases that traditionally what we think about when we think about data. And then the analytics side, I always go back on the analytics side back to the Cognoses and the business intelligence. But everybody's calling themselves a big data player. In a way they are, because they're playing with data, but I categorise big data this way. And there really is, there's 3 ways that I look at it. You first off have the big data storage companies. These are the guys that capture all the information, stick it in one location so you can retrieve it. EMCs, HDSs, all of the big storage companies. They're the main players. Then you have the big data consumers. White Pages is a perfect example of a big data consumer. Walmart is a big data consumer. Anybody drive south on the 101 going to work normally? So late last year, Walmart had a big data billboard on the 101 down near Whipple. Who would have thought Walmart was posting themselves as a big data company? But the amount of information they have is huge. When you think about the transactions that go on for them, the interactions that go on for them in their e-commerce site, it is massive. And there's lots of opportunity there. So there's the big data consumers. I'm a big data consumer. I don't think I'm probably a little data consumer, more than a big data consumer. But we have information as a talent acquisition. You, as talent acquisition professionals, have data within the walls of your environment or within the cloud that you want to get access to. So we will talk today about talent acquisition. What does it really mean to TA from a big data perspective? think it's very, very early days is what it really means. I think there's people trying to jump on the bandwagon. I'm a big data company for HR. I really haven't seen anybody just yet, because I don't think we actually have the volumes of data that really warrant us being called a big data solution for talent acquisition. That's just my theory today. Then the third part of this is really the platforms, the integrators. How do you bring the storage and the consumers together? This is where Informatica fits. This is where we fit. This is our bread and butter. It has been for many, many years at bringing those two things together. So let's get to the point of what we're really here to talk about today. Big data for HR. Does anybody have masses and masses of data that they think they have to crunch to be able to do their job? I'm interested to see what other sort of data sources people think. Is that a little one in the back? What have you got?
I think it's just a combination of employee records and databases, and then figuring out what's online and how to keep that together, and not so much an automated basis. Some of it ends up being manual.
Exactly.
Frustration.
Yep. Anybody else? What have you got?
Some way to functionally search LinkedIn.
Wouldn't that be, that's everybody's goal, or at least have their data in our own environment to be able to search through. I'm excited about the new Insight product they've got coming out. I saw some of it a few weeks ago. I was like, wow, there's some cool data that's there. If we could just get hold of it, it's awesome. So yeah, they're all very valid things, and very much in line with what I'm going to talk about this morning. So big data. So what are the data sources? We have data sources in our HRIS, whether it be people records, whether it be compensation records, attrition records. There's lots and lots of information inside our HRIS system today that I think the model's been around for a long time, and there's lots of reporting, and there's even predictive analytics tools that allow you to bring that stuff forward. So that's out there. But then you start throwing hiring at it, talent acquisition. We start thinking about data from requisitions. We start thinking about data from the selection process, the number of interviews, the ratios of manager submittal to interview, from interview to hire, from hire to performance review in the first 90 days or a year. There's all those levels of data that get snapshotted all over the place. Do we really look at it? Yeah, maybe on a QBR, maybe on a quarterly business review, but are we looking at it every day to see what's really going on? Then you have the candidate side of things. There's a lot of candidate data, where they came from, what their education was, what school they went to, all the things that we want to get to and say, well, what's going to make this person a good hire? So there's that sort of data from a talent perspective. Then there's performance data. How well did this person do against the source of hire? Was we hired everybody from company X? Well, guess what? They've scored well on our performance data, on our performance reviews. How do we correlate those two things together? So now we start driving our sourcing plans on here's where we want to go and hire those people from, because that proves success. Then you throw in the CRM. This is the area that we're starting to play in. So Dave Mendoza in the room, who's been my mad scientist for the last couple of years, getting all of this to consolidate into one space, the CRM. And the CRM for us is where it's consolidating all this together. And we use Avature as our CRM, but the CRM has so much information. Who here has a CRM? Candidate relationship system. What do you use?
Sorry, lost my train of thought.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Anybody else using Avature? Yeah. Any Avature clients? Oh, okay. So there's masses and masses of data you collect on prospects, because they're not candidates. They're not applicants. They haven't applied for a job. This is us going out to the web. This is us going out to LinkedIn and saying, this is a pool of talent that we've dumped in a project folder, and we know based on their skill set or based on their title that we think that person has a match. We've never spoken to them. This is just someone's resume that's up on the web, or something that we think is a resume. We now bring that into a CRM, and so now they're a lead or a prospect, and that's what we leverage with the CRM. So driving the data in there, it's not just about knowing what that person was at the time, it's about how do you keep the longevity of that data in that CRM. There's no use taking a piece of data and putting it in the system today, and that person in 2 or 3 years' time has changed jobs, added a lot of extra skill sets. If we keep searching on the data from today, then that's out-of-date data. So that CRM becomes static. So all the things that I'm driving, things that Dave's helping me drive, is around how do we keep that alive, and how do we keep that dynamic, and how do we keep that information flowing and new and fresh, so we can actually go out there and pull in the latest information. Then we get to social networking, and I think for me social networking is different to social media. Social networking to me is really LinkedIn. That's the biggest social network we have. Facebook, they try to be social networking with things like branch out and be known. Yeah, haven't really gone anywhere. I think they've gone all the way down saying, yeah, there's a how many people in LinkedIn now? A billion people in LinkedIn. But you know what? My mum and my auntie's in LinkedIn. I'm never going to go and hire them. And they're in my network. But my LinkedIn network is my professional connectivity, my professional connections to everybody. So there's masses and masses of data in there. And then when you say social media, you throw all of these icons. Some of these icons I don't even know who they are. But every day something comes up that's a new platform for social media in some way, shape or form. When you throw all of those data sources together, it becomes really, really difficult because every one of those areas has something that's really valuable, that has something that allows you to make a better hiring decision based on pieces of information. So one thing I do want to give you before you walk out of here this afternoon is at least some things that you can think about if you want to go down this path. I never ever present where you can't take away some nuggets that you can use. Otherwise I'm just sitting up here as a self-propagating BS. So I want to start with what are we really doing? You know, recruiting is about selling. My background is not recruiting. I'm a sales guy. I've been a sales guy for many, many years, and everything I apply to recruiting is a sales discipline. It's selling, it's closing, it's getting the order, it's negotiation, it's all of those things. So a lot of this stuff is that. So I want to start off with, let's remember what the end goal is. It's to recruit. Recruiting is selling. Selling is really differentiating, and I think there's Mars is giving a presentation on this afternoon or today around branding and why branding is so important. Branding is our way of giving a differentiator. Giving a differentiator gives you a hire. Especially in my space today, in the data space where everybody's competing for engineering talent, I have to compete with every big player that's out there. And the only way I can do that is by differentiating Informatica. We just got nominated for one of the top 7 happiest companies in the Bay. It's like, how did you get that? Okay, I'll take it. We're a happy company. But there's data out there that someone consolidated somehow, and we got that award. So where do you start? What's the recipe? There is a recipe to this. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But there's some methodologies that you have to be really critical about. Now, Dave is presenting tomorrow. He's going to go into a lot more detail about what I'm talking about today. I'm going to keep it at the 10,000-foot view. But from an executive, what I think about to get to this point is what's going to be covered in my slides. The biggest thing you've got to solve for is knowing what your problems are and starting with the end goal in mind. Now, I know I have to put a butt in a seat. My boss tells me I have to put X number of butts in a seat per year. But I don't want just any butt in a seat. I need to know that the butt in the seat is the best butt I can put. So, yes, that's the end goal. But how do I get there is all about how do I drive the quality in getting that higher. So, data dictionaries. These are terminologies that traditional recruiters or traditional recruiting spaces don't really talk about. So a data dictionary is just simply, how does the data look? Does anybody here know how their data is structured? There's how their data is structured, how things connect together. There's lots and lots of fields, and you have to really know what every single one is. And as a sales guy, I don't really want to go to that level of detail, but you have to if you want to get to this properly, because you have to know what your data is doing. So data dictionaries are very important. This is an example of what a data dictionary would look like, of how one field full of data connects to the next field. And that's still the limitation of databases. You have to have a common link between the two. Otherwise, the files won't work together. Data quality is a big issue, and that's where Dave's methodology talks a lot about how do you drive the data quality, how do you continue to update the quality of the data, cleanse the data, white space analysis, all those sorts of things. They're the two biggest challenges. And then how we look at it is through two different lenses, is the candidate lens and the requisition lens. Because from a recruiting perspective, they're really the two buckets of information we have. All of the data on the requisition and all of the data on the candidate, and we map through this. So data dictionaries are very, very important. I started last year trying to go into the big data space to actually consolidate a lot of our data, and I brought in an MBA intern. He was a computer science degree graduate previously. He was finishing his MBA. I brought this guy, Jing, in, who was just absolutely amazing with data. The way he could visualize the data was fantastic. and his task was to come in and pull all these things together for me. Well, the first thing he found out is our data was so messy. Coming from an ATS, you would expect, wow, it's pretty structured, but it actually wasn't. So he spent his whole internship cleaning up our data and helping us work through building the data dictionaries. And that's what you'll have to do. So either yourself, your operations functions, or even IT to come and help you do that. But that's pretty cool. The first part, once you get through your data dictionaries, is really understanding your process. You have to have your processes mapped out. If you don't know how your process flows work, no one else will either, especially your recruiters and your sources. So working through process flows, putting them in some sort of diagram like a Visio or something like that, and you can actually map out your process is very, very important, and a very laborious and a very slow process. Back in 2001, I was part of a leadership program at Cisco, and one of the exercises we had to do was a DMAIC Six Sigma course. It's like 2 days of DMAIC training. It's like, oh. It was just boring. So we've got a Six Sigma black belt at the front of the room, and like, here I'm a sales guy with another half a dozen sales guys in the room as well. What was I doing? Playing paper aeroplanes in the back of the room. Like, I really care, I'm a sales guy, why do I care about process? It is amazing today how much that has shaped my life. Scarily so, because there's one thing that they taught was input, activity, output. Something comes in, whether it be a sourcer gives a candidate to a recruiter, they have an activity, they do something with it, they do a screen, whatever, and that produces an output. Managers submittal. Everything we do in life, tying your shoes, well, I don't have shoelaces, so I don't tie them, but everything you do is input, activity, and result. If you think about your processes like that, it makes it very easy for you to understand them as well as everybody else as well. So process is really critical. Simplifying workflows. When we implemented Avature the first time, and I'll say the first time, we developed Avature to the point where we probably could have put the next shovel on the moon. Like, it was complicated. We had, I can't remember, 24, 25 workflows, because we were trying to think of every possible iteration of workflow that a recruiter could go through, because we thought that was making it easy, because, well, they didn't have to think about it. Well, you have to say adoption wasn't very, very good. We didn't get a lot of people really wanted to get in and use that. So we dumbed it down, now we have 2. So really thinking about your workflows and not over-analysing your workflows is pretty critical, especially from a data perspective. Central repository. We have multiple central repositories today. We have Workday, we have Virtual Ledgers and ATS, we have Avature, we have our performance system. They're all databases, but they're not central. So we actually leverage some of our tools that I'll share, which is lucky being a data company that we have in-house. It's available to everybody to have a central repository, because that is critical. How do you pull things together to be able to pull those things out? Talent intelligence. It's one thing having data, but it's another thing having the data that you know about your competitors. And Dave will go into a lot of this tomorrow about what are some of the ways you can actually get a lot of that talent intelligence and then bring that back through. That's the goal. That's the nuggets that all of us in this room really want on all of our candidates. So that's pretty critical that you know how to go and find that, but then know how to bring that back in. And then internal talent. Make sure you're not missing out on internal talent. And I'll cover off a little bit more of that later. And then the social connectors. They're the six pieces of the recipe that if you go down this path, and the top 3 are the most important, the bottom 3 is what you can leverage once you have the first 3. You can't do the bottom without the top. So let me give you some examples of some of these things, of how it might make it a little bit clearer. LinkedIn URL. How do we find someone on LinkedIn? We go and search their name. And then on the bottom it has a link, a URL link, to go directly to that person. There's multiple versions of that. Does anyone know what the multiple versions are of a LinkedIn URL? You have a vanity URL. Okay, so you can go in and change. So I can't remember what mine is, Brad Cook, VP, TA or something. That's my vanity URL. You can name that anything you like that's unique, and then that becomes a unique name. Behind that, if you look in the top of your browser, you won't see the vanity URL with the vanity name. It has a number. So every one of us in this room has a unique number that is a direct correlation back to you as a profile back in LinkedIn. If you capture the vanity URL and LinkedIn decides to do something different with their strategy, all of that data you've captured is now gone, because you've built a strategy around a subset of data that may not be there tomorrow. But LinkedIn is never, and I would probably say ever, going to get rid of the unique identifier for every single person. So having the right URL for LinkedIn in your backend databases is critical if you want to talk about data longevity. Otherwise, you put the vanity URL and LinkedIn changes it next year, you're going to start from scratch again. So an example of a LinkedIn URL. Yesterday, we would require a recruiter, if they found somebody, to cut and paste that URL into the system. A time-consuming process if you got 20 people in a search. What we did was, okay, how can I get that data into the system? Well, we use Jobs to Web as our front-end recruiting management system. So it's an SEO, a search engine optimized front end. When someone applies to our job, we ask them some information, and it's like a business card, name, rank, and serial number. Well, we originally turned off the apply with LinkedIn because I thought that there was some downside effects that really weren't worth the effort. Well, when I started thinking about how do I get that LinkedIn URL into my system, hang on a minute, I'll turn on LinkedIn, apply with LinkedIn, and what happens? It says, can I connect with you? Can I look at your data? And now that information comes straight through into our system. So that's what I mean by looking at the data by the field, where it starts, what the activity that happened, i.e. the apply, and the output, and now gets into my CRM. All of my data from the business card comes in as well through my CRM. So things like cell numbers and personal email addresses. The business card for us used to have phone number and email. And what do you think people normally would put in there if they're looking for a job or they wanted to join the talent community? Was a work email and a landline. Well, what happens when they leave that company? They're gone. You can't get to them that way. So we changed it to give us your cell number and then give us your personal email address. We had a 100% hit rate from that point forward of now data longevity. Take it one step further and start putting in the country code. Now, we realised that Avature didn't support country codes. Like, guys, we're a global company. You're a global company. You need to start thinking outside of the US. Because what happens when I want to start spending on SMS in India? So thinking of the data, we now turn on country code functionality inside Avature, or got them to build it for us to connect that. So that's the level of granularity you need to go to when you get to that. Putting in the social links, we're still looking for different platforms that can actually go out to the web and pull things back in. There really isn't a lot of players today that are doing that to integrate into one space. But really looking at the taxonomy as well. We've done a lot of work, Dave's done a lot of work for me on mapping out our sales competitors. So we know exactly who our sales competitors are by a couple of key words, and I'll show you in a second. So that's pretty important to know what your competitors look like. But also where people are coming from and going to is also critical as well. If I know that someone coming from IBM previously worked for Yahoo and they come up with really good performance data, I can start going back to a couple of steps before or a couple of steps after and start targeting those people on their trajectory to that company or that environment to come and hire at the company. So automating the data as much as you can is very, very critical. So
that step that you take where you drive your, these candidates from LinkedIn into your system, are you saying that you have brought in someone externally to create those links, or is it a function that
it's a system. We've turned it into a systematic function by leveraging a LinkedIn Apply widget that we turned on our Jobs to Web.
That's something that your company initiated. It's something that you guys developed within your organization.
No, that LinkedIn Apply widget's been around for a long time, but we just turned it on in the functionality of getting it within Jobs to Web, and from there the data can flow all the way through. So it's available. You just got to know how to connect it together.
All of your negative thoughts when it came to utilizing that LinkedIn widget, did any of those come true? Like, we had our meeting with Jobs Web last week to also talk about that widget and implementing that. But there's some negative, do we want to do this? Did you find that any of those negatives were true, or did you find there was more positive than negative?
The challenge we have with that widget is, if you look at our career site, we have a big block of imagery at the top that they had custom developed for us, and it actually interfered with that widget.
Okay.
So it took a bit of time for them to actually fix that, and they've done that now, so that I was willing to turn it back on. Okay. So at the time, it was crashing the website, wasn't willing to leave it on and have a bad customer experience, so we turned it off. When they fix it on the back end, then we turn it back on, ready to go.
They need Jobs to Web.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, sales. This is a perfect example of sales. Salespeople love to talk about themselves, what their achievements are and so forth. So what we do is we capture data using natural language. So this is an example of some of the algorithms that Dave has built for us around how to leverage sales data. Now, most big companies today have some sort of president's club, you know, the top 50 or top 100 companies. Somewhere in a profile, somewhere, they're going to have, I overachieved X, I have quota X, percentage millions of dollars exceeded. These are just terminologies that someone in the sales world that made a president's club is going to have something in there, and that's what's critical. So knowing what they are, going back to the competitor taxonomy, if you know what your competitors call, for us, that's what was most important for us, the sales area, we know what that's called, we can start searching on it and then bring in that level of data back in. So our approach, let me give you an idea of how we've actually done this. I'm going for time. We've done this by doing this. We have Workday. So Workday is our HRIS system. We have Sonar 6, which is our performance management system. We have Virtual Edge, which is our ATS. And we have Avature, which is our CRM. They're our 4 main HR systems in some way, shape or form. So that's where we have to pull the data from. Then we have to say, well, how do we get the data to somebody? Our executives wanted to get it to them via their phone, via the tablet, whatever that may be. So we had to always think about how we're going to get the data to them in some sort of fashion. So we looked at a couple of different ways. We've implemented Visio. Anyone know who Visio is? Anybody a Visio company or a Visio customer? Visio was actually started by the guys from Business Objects. So they left and started Visio. It's a predictive analytics tool. It's awesome. It connects straight into Workday. That's been their primary customer base today. It's really, really cool. They don't have a lot of recruiting functionality, so we're working with them to actually help them build the definitions of recruiting metrics so they can get in there to start getting some predictive analytics out of recruiting data. And we also use MicroStrategy, which is a business intelligence system, to actually really crunch the data as much as we can, more for ad hoc type of data to pull it out together and analyze it. So that's how we use it. But to connect the systems from the top to the bottom, we actually, and you can buy this as well off the web, is called the Informatica Cloud Connect. We have connectors today that connect databases, so Taleo is one that's available today, Workday is available today, SAP is available today, Oracle is available today. There's a lot of systems. Myself and our Senior Director of HR Ops is working with our cloud teams quite often because I think there's a huge market opportunity for HR. Every one of us in this room struggles with getting data out of our ATS. Even if you have the ability to pull it into a single repository, a single queue to report off, it's going to make our lives a heck of a lot easier when it comes to crunching. So we have that available, and what that does is it pulls all of the data from those separate systems, or whatever data we believe is important. So going back to what I said before, requisition data dictionary, candidate data dictionary, they're 2 data sets that we bring in. We also bring in some hierarchy data from Workday to link up to managers, and now we can start to pull that data and slice it and dice it in multiple different ways to see where we go. Still not big data. It's still leveraging tools that are available today. It's not leveraging Hadoop or anything like that. And that's why I sort of debunk the theory of talent acquisition and HR. I don't think we really have the volumes of data that a White Pages would have, like a Walmart would have, a retailer of those sorts. But we may get there if someone actually starts to collect this sort of things together. I think if we ever got to the world where LinkedIn would open up their APIs, and Monster, if they're still around, or Career Builder opens up their so-called profile database, and we pull census data together, we bring it all together into one, and now we start bringing social media aspects into it as well, then we have the possibility of a big data something for HR and talent acquisition. But we're still a long way away from that. I can't ever think that LinkedIn is going to open up Pandora's box and give us that. So where are we going? About consolidating systems. It's all about using that cloud connector, we're bringing that back in. All of that data we've continued to bring in. We've done Workday, we've done Virtual Edge, we've done a manual entry of the performance data. We haven't integrated Avature just yet, that's in phase 2. So we're moving towards consolidating that. When we get those things consolidated, relationship management becomes even more important because we have all of that data in one place. Still not social data. We have social connectors that we have as a company, and there's technology, so I'll get back to the story at the beginning about the criminals, but that's where we start to get to. When you start thinking about sentiment analysis, We use Radiant 6. A sentiment analysis is basically something goes out there and tells me, Glassdoor is a good example, has someone posted a negative review of Informatica? Well, every time that happens now, it doesn't happen very often because we're a happy company, we get a notification. So Radiant 6 is monitoring social websites to see positive or negative sentiment. That in itself can produce masses and masses of data. I'm not sure what we're going to do with that yet, but eventually we'll actually consolidate that data. Master data management, I'll come back to in a second, which comes back to the original story at the beginning. Big data analysis, I need to show it some sort of return on investment. I'm just not going to throw resources at this just for the sake of it's the next buzz, because I need to get something out of it. So we're still working on how we really drive the ROI of the analytics. And then that social data interaction, that's pretty critical to us. So back to MDM. So back to the criminals and talent acquisition. MDM, Master Data Management, is a technology that's been around for a couple of years, and it's basically a single view of ethics. Single view of criminal, single view of terrorist, single view of pedophile, single view of candidate. And just think about single view of candidate, what that would do. Let me give you an example of what MDM is. A bank. We have multiple banks. Banks get bought by other banks. We may have two accounts in multiple different banks, but they're now merged. So they have two customer records. Well, you now get two statements from two different banks. It's a bit of a pain in the butt. So what do? They leverage an MDM solution to bring you as a customer into one. So now you have one customer, and then below that it shows the hierarchy of how all those things link together. Now let's come back to the teaser at the beginning. What does TA have to do with criminals? Master data management, single view of customer, single view of candidate, is exactly the same as single view of criminal. A large government organisation outside of the US, although the US does leverage our tool for this, and if the US had a lot of this integration in MDM before 9/11, 9/11 probably wouldn't have happened. In this other large government organisation, 4 days after, 5 minutes, 4 days after they launched the MDM solution, they caught 4 murderers, just because they didn't have a single view of where they were coming in under the radar. That's the power of data, of pulling the data into one common view. Now start applying the thought of that, of one common view of the candidate from all of the different data sources around the world we'll talk about today. That's where I want to go. That's what I'm starting to have conversations with our product developers internally. All of our customers today has been customer facing. Retail is a big customer of MDM because they've got masses of data and lots of customers. So we're just building a use case analysis around that at the moment of how can we do that internally. So some pretty interesting things coming up that may shape the things that we're doing. So just to recap, if you really talk about the DIY for TA and big data, it's about mapping your processes. Talked about that before. It's about standardising your protocol, standardising your workflow, understanding that, simplifying that as much as possible. Adding your social URLs, like the LinkedIn example. How do you automate getting those things in as best as possible so you don't have to have someone crunching the data and doing some sort of manual entry? Those are the first three big bets. Then you want to segment your data. We talked about understanding your competitor, understanding what their taxonomy is, what do they call them, what products are like ours, where do they sit, what are their KPIs, how do they measure performance. If you know what that is, you can start segmenting your data. Building that intelligence off that data that you've captured, putting it into a central repository. And then from there you can start targeting and start doing a lot of targeted branding around that as well. So they're the major big bets. So tomorrow at 11, David's presenting on this in a lot more detail, so hopefully you're around tomorrow to get into a lot of that. He has just launched a white paper. I'm not sure whether you have any copies here, but that is the URL. So I think you have a printout of that with the URL in it. It is an excellent, excellent read. Not because it has anything to do with Informatica, but it gives you a really good picture of the necessity of big data, but the necessity of a methodology and of how to adopt that methodology and some of the challenges you may face, because these are the challenges that we face over the last 2 years. This is the Informatica story, basically, from Dave's view as a consultant for me with the company. There's a lot of great knowledge in there that I think is going to shape the industry, because it is further forward. So I'll leave you with this equation. If you understand your competitors, you understand their products and how they relate to you, and you understand what their KPIs are, how they performance measure either engineers or salespeople, that gives you a talent pipeline. So you know where to go and look. LinkedIn is a good example. If you then add the business intelligence and the social data, you have longevity of pipeline. And that's what we all have to care about. It's no use going and finding a candidate today. You have to build that candidate relationship today and keep it until the day that you're ready to hire them or they're ready to move from their current company. You have to be able to bring them in. So longevity of that data, the dynamic nature of that data, is in my mind the biggest challenge that anybody that has a CRM or any talent acquisition data there is the biggest challenge we're going to have to face in our industry. Is how do we continue to refresh that information? Because LinkedIn is not going to make it easy for us to pull from LinkedIn. So pipeline longevity is probably in my mind the biggest problem to be solved. If you add those two things together, you actually end up with what David's coined, future casting. How do you future cast out what your needs are, and how do you build that pipeline today? How do you maintain that pipeline for not just today, but for tomorrow and the year after? And that's where things are going. That's sort of where big data fits into it at the moment. In my mind, it's still little data, but I think there is such a big data for TA, sort of little data for TA right now. But when you start getting into this level of granularity, and if we are able to crack the egg on bringing the social data in, that's when I think we'll see the true big data analytics for HR and for talent acquisition, because that's where we're going to have this exponential curve again. Questions?
How do you think that talent acquisition will change with all that data that we will now have that we really can't use to make a hiring decision?
That's a good question. I'll do a tap dance on that one. I don't know. I really don't know. There's data out there that you can leverage for schools and GPAs and stuff like that. That's the sort of thing you know is there, so you can basically use as a filtering process. I don't know. It's a good question. Now you're going to have me thinking about it. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's really a problem when you're looking at internal data as well. Some external social media data. I don't know. Things like Guild and Swoop and Talent Bin, I think they're leveraging other data sets that are going out and finding public domain information and pulling them back in. I think they're the things that will help us make better decisions, especially on the technical front, because that goes out and finds public domain information from blogs and so forth about engineers and how good their code is. That sort of data could be used. You know, we're going to go and pull back in all the drunken photos of someone's Facebook. No, we wouldn't pull that back in. Good question.
I'm pretty impressed that for a company of 2,800 employees, how many analytical tools that you use. So I'm just curious, because the company I work for is about 5 to 6 times larger. What's your annual spend on all of these tools that you have to work from a ballpark?
Not much. Not much.
What size is your team? How many people?
I have 40 people in my organisation. Of the 40 people, I have a senior manager of my ops function, and he has a systems guy and a programs manager and 2 coordinators. I have 1 person dedicated to branding. I had Dave for a couple of years was my strategist, my talent strategist on, where should I sort of be thinking about and bouncing things off.
And how many recs do you work personally?
Probably 3 or 4. I don't handle a lot of recs, I just handle the executives. The rest of them is then recruiters and sources. So I have 40 people total, but of that I'd probably say take away 10 for operations function. And for me, the operations function is just as important as talent acquisition, as the recruiting side. And that was my spiel last year on the circuit. It was all about the story of how to get to this point. The lucky thing for me is when I started Informatica, we really had nothing. You pull a drawer out and you find a resume, and the recruiter started from that every single time. So when I got imported from Australia to come back to the US and actually start Informatica's recruiting, it's like I had a greenfield, so I had a lot of fun. And we tested every bell and whistle and every shiny object, and that was my story last year. Was like, shiny objects, be careful of them. And we tested a lot of things, and now we've standardised on a lot. So back to the question of how much I spend, I don't spend a lot. My budget is less than $4 million. And that covers every single thing. All my spend on recruiters, my salaries, on everything. That will cover as well. Yeah.
Agencies?
We've taken down from 11 to 2%. Do it all in-house.
What's your rent roll for every position?
Take it from 25 down to 10.
What was the question?
What's a rec load?
What's the rent roll?
Yeah. We started at 25 to 30 when I moved in. It's like, you guys, we're a niche player. We can't have that much volume. So everybody was just churning and the quality was poor. So I dropped it down to 20, then to 15, now down to 10. In Europe, I drop it down to 8 because it's even harder again. And that fluctuates. And my R&D person now is up to 35. But I'll throw additional sourcing support because it's not the client side, it's the back end, finding the person that is the hard part. So I average between 10 and 15 ideally, and I have a lot of capacity models that I've built out that shows my workforce planning coming in, the current rec load, what the rec load is expected to be for the next quarter hiring, gives me a percent. And I know once I get past a certain percent, I need to go to the boss and say, I need some more money.
And what's your attrition on that rent roll?
What's the attrition on?
On the rent roll, so how long do you say you hire for?
We are well below industry average from an attrition perspective across the company. Yeah. So I wouldn't give out exact percentages, but we are well below attrition.
Out of 30 recruitment sources, how many do you have dedicated to the social media sites?
One, my branding person. Personally, I don't believe in social media recruiting for my industry and my space. I'm not going to find engineers and Top Gun enterprise salespeople sitting on Facebook doing interaction with me. It doesn't exist for me. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist for other people, but for me, the social interaction doesn't work. What I leverage social media for is outreach and visibility and awareness creation. So everything I do on all of my social media platforms is all about getting the word out there. I leverage SEO. If you don't know what SEO is and search engine optimization, you need to know that more than anything else. Because everything around marketing and branding is about how do you get the word out there and how do you get visibility out there leveraging digital tools. And that's what SEO does. And that's where we leverage SEO and social media to get that word out there in a shotgun fashion. A year ago, if one of my recruiters called up a person, a cold call, and said, here, I'm from Informatica, the first question was, Informatica who? It's like, who are you? Like the first question here. Now, if they call up, oh, Informatica, oh, you're the big data people. Yes, please, I want to have your call. That's because of the shotgun effect of all the things we've done. And again, I spent $130,000, $140,000 on my complete rebrand of the company for employment branding. Because we just did it smart and we leverage online tools, SEO, Indeed, Simply Hired, PPC, pay-per-click, those sort of things to do this. It actually isn't rocket science if you actually pull the things together. And that's what Dave helped me understand, how to pull these things together. My process bent now allows me to understand the input, activity, and output to have those dots joined together. And that, quite frankly, is the hardest thing. That's the hardest thing for my team to understand too, how all these dots join together. My leadership team gets it because they spend a lot of time with me, and I spend most of my time with my extended team just re-going over the vision, the strategy, the execution of this, how these things piece together, do lots of whiteboard sessions, because it has taken a lot of time for them to come up with it, but now they're finally getting it.
Did you have your branding person there?
My first person I hired was my systems guy, Virtual Edge. I pulled him out of VE to come and be basically my systems person to rebuild Virtual Edge. My second hire was my branding person, and I brought her with me from Cisco. Because she did it for me at Cisco as well. For me, if you don't have those two people, the systems or an ops guy and a branding person, you're really behind the eight ball. Because if you've only got recruiters, what do recruiters do all day? They recruit. They're transactional. So I have two leaders managing my transactional business, and their focus is all on button a seat, button a seat, button a seat. My operations team and I spend more time on the innovation. How do I get more out of what we've already got for less? How do I improve? Someone said to me the other day, as we got on a call with some clients that we were comparing our Avature instance with theirs, and within 15 minutes, like, hang on a minute, we're actually a lot further ahead than that. But my view was like, we're not as good as everybody else. So that really keeps me driving to get better than everybody else, even if we're actually not. We're already there. So we continuously improve all the time, even though we don't need to. And that's how we get ahead. the stuff that we tend to push out is corporate content. We do push out jobs. That's how we get visibility out there. So a lot of people see Informatica everywhere because we don't necessarily post jobs everywhere, but we push jobs out there through SEO type means, search engine type means. A lot of the content we push, either retweets or LinkedIn updates and those sort of things, come from corporate content. So we have a very strong relationship with marketing that when they produce something, if it's useful, I take it, I usually send it out, or my team sees I send it out, they'll do it as well. We haven't yet set up an automated system. We were looking at Hootsuite. Radiant 6 has the same content management type of functionality that can actually send things out. That's what we're working on this year. We're going through a massive company rebranding this year. So we've just got a new EVP of marketing, so I'm really excited about the new brand that's coming out. And then there'll be even more content from that as well. But we regurgitate a lot of industry content. Because for me, I need to get someone convinced on the industry. Big data is the next industry you want to be in, not be a programmer or be a developer. That's how we do it. So there's a lot of content about that.
I have a question around career page. What are some of the things that make Informatica's career page unique?
Normally I'd say nothing. It's just data that's there in a single location. It looks different. It looks different to any other career page that you're likely to go and see because it has more of a swipe look and feel like you're doing on a tablet. We're using a lot of video content, a lot of colour, that sort of stuff. You know, nothing exciting, I don't think. It's what's behind the engine, I think, that makes us different of how we're connecting the dots with all of the analytics, with jobs to web and that sort of things. We are moving to a mobile platform. We're using Mendoza. We're fixing our apply process. Every ATS apply process is horrible. Half an hour to apply. You know, we actually put a survey question in there to say, what is the candidate experience like? And to be quite frank, I'm surprised at the answers. They said it's great. So really, okay, we obviously just must suck less than everybody else. So going to a mobile platform is we're going to take it from a 20-minute process down to probably 4 minutes because we're going to be leveraging Dropbox and Google Drive to have a web-based resume, bring it down, capture that data once, and then push it to our business card, push it to our ATS. So from a candidate perspective, data in once, pushed out multiple times. And that's going to then drive a lot more differentiation on the mobile store, on the career side. I think I'm probably out of time.
Yeah, maybe there was one more question. Did you have a question back there?
Yeah, I did. I just was wondering, how does this approach apply to those high volume positions that you recruit for, that companies recruit for? Does it impact at all? Or
We don't have high volume.
I know, that's why I kind of got that.
Yep.
Right? When I think about my group, the West area alone, we're going to hire like 2,000 people this year.
Yep.
Would this approach work, or is it really more so for those positions where you're recruiting a higher level of talent, not more so that high volume talent?
I think this would work exactly the same way because it's about knowing who the talent pool is, where the talent pool is. It's always about supply and demand. You have your demand, which is the job. You have the supply, which is the talent pool. You need to know where that supply is. And if you know where that supply is, you need to have it come back into some sort of central repository, like a CRM system, to know where to either market to it so they know who you are. And if they know who you are, when you make that final phone call or you do some sort of marketing to them, they're more likely to pick up the phone or click the apply button to go all the way through. So for me, the principle works exactly the same, whether it's niche players or high volume. Absolutely, good question.
And on that note, I had a similar situation. I had close to 600 positions that were open. I had over 20,000 applicants. If I didn't create the right questions
Right, to filter them out.
to filter them out,
I had that problem in India.
and that's what happened. It's like it got extremely full data.
Yep.
So I had to make the hiring process a little bit more difficult. I had to go for the 4 minutes.
Yep, to drop them out. In India's that problem all the time. We always usually get a 100-to-1 ratio of that. We had one of our recruiters who was an engineer by background, so he goes out to all these engineering blogs. He posted a link on a blog. We actually thought we'd been hacked because I saw this massive spike in our systems and our data. Like, hang on, what's going on? It's because he posted on a blog, and there's a million engineers graduate in India, and only 500,000 of them end up with jobs or internships. always 500,000 of them wanting to get a job. So we had a massive, massive spike, and it was a 100-to-1 ratio. So we had to put those basic qualification filters in up front to bounce them out. And they don't know they're getting bounced out, but when they do hit the ATS, they have a big bullseye on it. They're like, okay, they didn't pass the basic quals.
But a lot of them figure it out in their mind. So when
Yeah.
you're making that phone call, they're hanging up on the
Yeah, I learned something last week because I just come back from India, and Hyderabad, which is a pretty big tech area, is the highest rated BS resume in India. Most resumes that come from Hyderabad are total BS. It's like, well, I didn't know that. But people just make up stuff all the time and just submit it. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, just, you referenced in a slide Sonar 6.
Yep.